This is the iPhone 17 Pro Max. No, wait, that's not right. This is the iPhone 17 Pro Max. No, wait, that's not right either. This one? Nope, that's the iPhone 8 Plus. That's better. This is the iPhone 17 Pro Max. But can you believe this thing evolved out of this thing and it only took 18 years? Okay, look, at this point, you've probably watched a million iPhone 17 Pro reviews from your favorite tech YouTubers. But very few, if any of them, are going to tell you the one simple truth about this phone. But before I tell you about that truth, let's talk about what it's been like living with Apple's flagship iPhone for about a month, and whether it's worth the upgrade. From a complete material overhaul to some really impressive camera upgrades, Apple has made some bold choices this year, but are they the right choices? I'm going to cover everything from the new aluminum design, the camera plateau, the A19 Pro chip and its performance, battery life, to yes, frankly, the rather stupid durability drama that's been all over the internet. So let's have a look at my review of Apple's latest flagship phone, from someone who owned, used, and cherished the very first iPhone. Let's start with this year's elephant in the room. Apple has completely changed the material of the Pro models this year. After a few years of using titanium on the 15 and 16 Pro, we're now back to aluminum. Now I know what you're thinking. Isn't that a bit of a downgrade? Well, it's a bit complicated. Apple says this is a specially formulated aerospace-grade aluminum that's actually more refined and precisely engineered than the titanium we had before. And in the hand, I admit it feels really fantastic. There's something about aluminum that just feels a bit warmer and softer to the touch. Of course, none of this matters too much if you're just going to stick it in a case. This year's iPhone 17 Pro Max comes in at 233 grams, or 8.22 ounces, which is 6 grams heavier than last year's model. Already a fairly heavy phone. Will you notice that heaviness? Probably not. After all, 6 grams is just a bit more than the weight of 2 US pennies. Speaking of the aluminum body, let's talk colors. Apple wasn't afraid of taking some risks with its color choices this year. Unlike well-known tech YouTuber Marques Brownlee's reaction, there appears to have been an equal uproar over the lack of a black option this year, and a pretty polarized reaction to the cosmic orange color. So this year's Pro phones are available in only 3 colors: silver, deep blue, and cosmic orange. And looking at these options, it's clear that Apple wanted to make a lot of noise with their color choices for the Pro lineup this year, while also recognizing that they still needed to offer a dark or light and let's call it a wild color option. I'd love to see the breakdown of unit sales by color, but if I had to guess, I would say that orange is probably outselling the other 2 colors. And while that's just based on anecdotal evidence of the few 17 Pros I've seen out in the wild here up in Canada, I think a lot of people have been waiting for a long time for Apple to make a more fashionable and colorful option available in their Pro phone lineup. In any case, seeing as how my favorite color is orange, I immediately felt like this year's Pro phone was made just for me. Of course, not all oranges are made equal, and as you can see with this collection of various products and items I have here, the cosmic orange is, well, perhaps not the exact orange I would have chosen. I would have probably gone with something more of a Basecamp orange that may have looked a little bit better, rather than the slightly coppery-looking cosmic orange Apple chose. That said, I do understand that it's a bold and polarizing choice, especially since the back of the phone, which is where the vast majority of the color is, features a bit of a two-tone design, with a glass portion of the case that allows for wireless charging. At certain angles, the difference in color can be quite striking, but in other lighting conditions, it's barely noticeable. That's definitely a bit of a quirk with this year's Pro lineup. Another distinctive change this year is what Apple is calling the camera plateau. Instead of the traditional camera bump that protrudes from the back, Apple has created this raised platform that extends across the entire portion of the back case. It's essentially a flat, elevated section that the camera lenses still protrude out of. Aesthetically, well, it's still also polarizing. Some people love the clean architectural look of this plateau, and others think it looks like Apple just gave up on making the camera flush. Aesthetically, I'm a bit torn on whether it looks better than the square design of the previous camera Mesa on the older Pro and Pro Max models, especially this empty space here. In the middle, it looks a bit awkward to me. Nevertheless, the camera plateau does accomplish one thing that previous phones didn't. If you're running caseless and you have a habit of putting your phone down with the screen facing you, the plateau now provides a bit more stability when you set it down on a table, basically allowing it to be less wobbly in this scenario. I've also found that the plateau has made the phone feel a bit more balanced in the hand. So I think it's safe to say that this year's design choices on the iPhone Pro have definitely been met with mixed feelings. But according to recent reports, it looks like the Pro phones have been significantly outselling last year's Pro phones, and Apple's stock price has risen to new all-time highs. All that to say, I guess people are either really digging these new design choices, or they simply don't care that much about the design and simply care more about what the iPhone can do for them, and they see the other big upgrades as being big enough this year to get a new phone. One thing that was a bit of a letdown this year was that the size of the camera and Face ID cutout on the front, also known as the dynamic island, didn't shrink in size. Though there are rumors going around that the next year's 18 models will be going to a hole punch design, similar to those found in high-end Android phones. One thing is for certain. The holy grail of absolutely no cutout on the front of any kind is probably still a few years away. Just don't ask me about the design of the 17 Pro and how it compares to Apple's other iPhones released this year, because I think the iPhone Air, well, that may just be the most beautiful phone that Apple has ever made. Okay, remember how I said that there has been some drama about the durability of the aluminum frame? Well, let's break this down as simply as we can. Apple's switch to an all-aluminum body this year means that the frames and edges of the phone, which often take the brunt of an impact from a drop, are definitely more susceptible to damage. I have no doubt that that is true. After all, aluminum is significantly softer than titanium, though some alloyed aluminums can be harder than pure titanium also. From what I've managed to gather, Apple is using an aerospace-grade 7000 series aluminum alloy, which exhibits high strength, and it's great for heat dissipation, which is the entire reason why Apple chose to go back to aluminum. But we'll get to that in a bit. I feel like this whole aluminum damage or chipping controversy is frankly a bit ridiculous. People are dropping their iPhones intentionally or accidentally, and then going on camera to complain about how the paint is scratching or chipping. And I'm sitting here thinking, yes, you dropped a phone made of metal without a case on, and the paint scratched? Shocking, I know. Look, I'm not trying to dismiss this concern, but I feel like the outrage for clicks on this has been ginned up to an unreasonable level. Sure, a $1,200 phone shouldn't explode into tiny pieces the moment you drop it. But again, there seems to be some collective amnesia that the titanium models had their own durability and scratching issues. Such is the nature of metal meeting concrete or floor, or whatever you drop this phone on. Again, if you're quite worried about this, just put a case on it, and this entire conversation becomes moot. And let's be real, most people are using cases anyway. I think what's happening here is people are conflating premium material with indestructible, and those aren't the same thing. The aluminum is premium. It's lightweight, it feels great, and it's actually quite durable for normal use. But if you're doing drop tests or treating your phone roughly, yeah, it's going to show some wear. Is it less durable than titanium? Yeah, probably in some ways. The paint is softer, but the actual structural integrity? Apple says this aluminum alloy is actually more impact resistant than the titanium frame. So in a serious drop, The aluminum might dent but absorb the impact better, potentially protecting all the internal components more effectively. And all of this leads me to the next point, and that is that it looks like Apple really went out of their way to increase the durability of other parts of the iPhone this year, namely all the glass. According to Apple, this year's phone made significant improvements to the ceramic shield on the glass. This is the second generation of it, and Apple claims it's 3 times more scratch resistant than the previous generation. But what does that actually mean? Thankfully, other YouTubers like Mobile Reviews A have gone out of their way to compare this year's Ceramic Shield 2 against last year's phone, which featured the first version of the Ceramic Shield. And I'll leave a link to that video in the description. Over the past 30 plus days, I've been using my phone in a variety of settings, both with a case on and off and no screen protector. And upon close inspection, I've yet to detect even a single tiny scratch on the screen, which bodes well for the future of how this phone will hold up in the long run. The new ceramic shield extends to the camera plateau as well, protecting those lenses with the same advanced material. One of the most significant internal changes is the introduction of vapor chamber cooling technology. This is a first for the iPhone, though it's been used in Android flagships for years. Essentially, vapor chamber cooling uses a sealed chamber with a small amount of liquid that evaporates and condenses to transfer heat away from the processor much more efficiently than traditional heat sinks. The aluminum alloy that Apple chose to make this year's iPhone out of is also a better heat conductor than titanium, which also helps with the heat dissipation. But why does this matter? Well, because anytime you can get a high-performance chip like the A19 Pro to run cooler while performing CPU and GPU-intensive tasks like gaming, 4K video recording, or extended use of AR applications, the better performance you will see out of your iPhone. The vapor chamber keeps everything running cooler, which means sustained performance without thermal throttling of the A19 Pro. I don't have a thermal camera, but this screenshot from HTX Studio's incredibly good iPhone 17 Pro review shows just how much cooler the iPhone 17 Pro runs as compared to last year's 16 Pro. In practical terms, I can game on this phone for extended sessions without it getting uncomfortably warm. Recording 4K 120 frames per second video for 10 plus minutes straight, the phone stays remarkably cool. This is a real game changer for performance consistency. The A19 Pro chip is built on a second generation 3nm process, and the improvements are substantial. Apple claims up to 20% faster CPU performance and 25% faster GPU performance compared to the A18 Pro. In real-world use, this translates to improved benchmarks, such as on Geekbench 6, the single score being around 3,800, and multi-core being around 9,700. But benchmarks only tell part of the story. The real improvement is in the sustained performance thanks to that vapor chamber cooling, where the 16 Pro Max would start to throttle after about 5 minutes of intensive gaming. The 17 Pro Max maintains near peak performance for much longer. Here's what I've noticed. App launching, as compared to the 16 Pro Max, is marginally faster, but we're talking milliseconds. In gaming, significantly better sustained performance on the 17 Pro Max, especially in demanding titles like Resident Evil Village or Assassin's Creed Mirage. When it comes to photo processing, the neural engine improvements mean computational photography processing is somewhat quicker. And when it comes to video exporting, you can see a real difference here. Easily 15 to 20% faster than on last year's Pro Max. As for AI tasks, well, there's not much to explore here since Apple notably delayed the launch of many of their promised Apple Intelligence features. But the ones that do exist seem to run just a little bit faster than last year's phone. Now let's get to what many people care about most, the cameras. Look, the truth is that Apple's iPhone is by far and away the most popular camera in the world. No other phone or camera comes even close to producing the volume of photos and videos that are taken with the iPhone around the world every day. In many ways, Apple knows that the lenses, image processing, and camera features inside every single iPhone are probably the single most important reason for people upgrading either every year or every few years. The iPhone has become humanity's default camera and probably the most important history recording device ever made. So it's no wonder that this year's Pro models are yet another significant improvement in upgrading the iPhone Pro's photographic chops. That said, as an amateur photographer who has been shooting, well, since the film days and have owned multiple Canon and full-frame Sony DSLRs, I'm not under any illusion that the iPhone can replace a full-size camera from one of those manufacturers just yet. The physics simply just don't allow for that right now. But as the photography maxim goes, the best camera is the one with you. And more often than not, that's the iPhone. Check out this part of the Waveform podcast where tech reviewers compare photos taken in the French Alps with an iPhone 17 Pro and a Leica M11, a $9,000 camera. Okay, let's talk about what's changed from last year's models when it comes to the cameras. The main Fusion camera is still 48 megapixels, and it's still excellent. If you're used to shooting the majority of your photos in 1x, you won't notice much of a difference here, with the exception that Apple has slightly improved their image processing pipeline year over year. In my testing, night mode shots are somewhat cleaner with a little bit less noise and better color accuracy. The dynamic range seems to have also improved a little bit, and you're just getting a little bit more detail in highlights and shadows. The ultra-wide lens has also remained largely the same. I haven't noticed much of a difference from last year's lens, but if you're coming from an older iPhone Pro Max like the 12 or 13, the wide camera's 48 megapixel resolution makes a huge difference. The telephoto lens is the massive upgrade to this year's iPhone camera system. The telephoto lens has been upgraded from 12 megapixels to 48 megapixels, which is truly bonkers. It simply means that you can now get much more image from your telephoto shots at 4x, which is about 100 millimeter equivalent in the 35 millimeter camera world. And at 8x, which is about a 200 millimeter zoom, though that is simply a crop of the 4x, meaning that any photos you take at the 8x zoom will only be 12 megapixels in size. One thing to note is that Apple didn't just do a simple digital crop for the 8x zoom. They're actually doing some image processing, even in the Apple Pro RAW format, at that level of zoom to improve the quality of images. And frankly, the quality difference from a straight crop is noticeable, well, at least to my eyes. Okay, let's have a look at some examples of photos and videos I've shot with the iPhone 17 Pro Max over the last month or so. Note that I have done exactly zero editing to these raw photos and videos. These are straight out of the camera. I first started with a few photos of one of my cats indoors in truly terrible lighting conditions, and the iPhone handled these shots with its usual slightly over-processed zeal. But I feel like indoor low-light photos this year are a bit better with the color processing being quite good. Next, I decided to take some macros of some fallen leaves. Then I decided to put each lens through its paces at a local coffee shop with mixed lighting conditions. And each lens performed fairly well, about what I've grown to expect from the flagship iPhone over the years. Though even here, I'm quite happy with the extended range of the 4x and 8x telephoto lens. Next, I took the iPhone to a local horse farm where my daughter takes riding lessons and started to test out each lens. Overall, some very impressive results across the board. even in lower lighting conditions, like inside this riding barn where my daughter was practicing her horse riding skills, the iPhone Pro Max performed very well. Here's how it performed at the same farm about an hour after sunset. Though as you can probably see, night shots are still where the iPhone camera struggles a bit compared to full frame and full-size cameras even from 5 to 8 years ago. And of course, Apple still hasn't fixed some of those lens flare issues, which I'm wondering what's it going to take for them to tackle this problem. I also ran into this cool classic car that I wanted to photograph at each zoom level. And finally, here's a photo of a very colorful tree on my street at the various zoom levels. Another terrific upgrade that frankly is maybe more impactful for the everyday user is the new 18-megapixel center stage front-facing selfie camera. Thanks to a new square sensor, the new center stage camera now gives you flexible ways to frame your photos and videos. You can simply tap to expand the field of view and shoot selfies in both vertical and horizontal orientation without having to rotate the actual phone. And when other people join you in group selfies, the field of view will automatically expand to make the billions of selfies people take much easier to shoot and frankly more delightful. Additionally, the new camera brings center stage for video calls, a feature borrowed from the iPad. Another bonus of the upgraded front-facing center stage camera is the introduction of a new dual capture video mode. This is Apple's nod to content creators. The dual capture mode lets you record from both the front and back cameras simultaneously, allowing for new use cases like reaction videos. The one thing to note, though, is that you can't edit the placement of the small window after you've recorded your dual capture video. This is the kind of feature that seems simple, but opens up creative possibilities that weren't practical before. Another feature that I was eager to test with this year's iPhone camera was how it does with the action mode. And here are the results. Shooting in action mode at the 4x and 8x zoom levels, you can see how good the stabilization is. And despite my very shaky video taking while my daughter performed some stunts, frankly, it's amazing. Even at the 8x zoom length, the stabilization is, for a lack of a better word, almost like magic. This is going to make a huge difference for the legions of parents that use their iPhones to record their kids' activities or sports competitions. Battery life is another area where the iPhone 17 Pro Max shines. Apple claims up to 39 hours of video playback, but not everybody just sits there watching video on their phone and doing nothing else. But in real-world use, I'm consistently getting through the day, through a full day with around 70% battery remaining. That said, I have to admit that out of all the devices I use on a daily basis, the iPhone is probably my third most used device after my iPad and my MacBook Pro. It's impressive, especially considering I've got the always-on screen enabled. Of course, as time goes on and the battery slowly but surely begins to degrade, the amount of juice I have left at the end of the day will inevitably drop. It'll be interesting to watch over the next few years which manufacturers begin to push into new battery technologies like sodium-ion to increase battery density and performance. Charging speeds have also improved, with Apple claiming that you can get a 50% full charge in 20 minutes with a 40-watt or higher adapter, while wireless MagSafe charging improves from 22 watts last year to 25 watts this year. Okay, let's quickly go over a few other things. The 6.9-inch Super Retina XDR display is the same as last year. ProMotion, always on, HDR, and the only two differences that I can see are that the maximum brightness in outdoor settings goes from 2000 nits peak brightness to 3000 nits peak brightness, which is actually fairly noticeable in direct sun conditions. And the other change from the 16 Pro models to this year's 17 Pros is that they have a better anti-reflective coating on the screen. How much? Well, in my estimation, I'd say that the reflections are cut down between 15 to 20%, which again is a really nice touch, but still a ways to go to match some of the other Android OLED screen models. In any case, it's still one of the best displays on any phone. The action button carries over from the 16 Pro Max. It's still useful, still customizable, and I have mine set to launch the flashlight, and I guess it's fine. I know someday I'll map it out to some sort of useful and complicated shortcut, but that day is not today. The camera control button, well, nothing has changed there. And Apple strangely didn't even mention it a single time during their September iPhone introduction event. I have to be honest, I found this button to be surprisingly not great since it first appeared. It's just too finicky and not enough of an improvement over on-screen controls to serve as a useful camera control button. Now, if Apple was ever brave enough to put a dial or crown there, now we're talking. That idea is free, Apple. You're welcome. Remember how I told you at the start of this video that there is a simple truth about the iPhone 17 Pro lineup? Well, it is simple. It's an incredible phone. I think for the average person, though, it's a bit overkill, especially if you're working with a limited budget. The plain Jane iPhone 17 is probably more than good enough for most people. And that leads to the question of, should you buy the iPhone 17 Pro Max? Well, I suppose that's a personal decision. But if you're coming from an iPhone 15 Pro or older, this is, a pretty decent upgrade, but it's not world-changing. The camera improvements are quite good, and perhaps they alone make it worthwhile for photography enthusiasts and content creators. The center stage front camera, dual capture, and ultra-stabilized video are all great upgrades. And the move from the 12 to the 48 megapixels on the telephoto camera is a huge change that parents, I think, in particular, will benefit from. Of course, the A19 Pro chip with vapor chamber cooling means this phone will stay fast and responsive for years to come. And the battery life improvements are definitely real and noticeable. The aluminum body, well, in my opinion, it feels great and performs well. Yes, it can show some wear if you don't use a case, but let's be honest, that applies to virtually every phone made out of virtually any material. So, I think the iPhone 17 Pro Max is an excellent phone that made some bold choices. The aluminum body is divisive, yes, but ultimately I think it's the right call in favor of improved sustained performance. The camera upgrades are very good. And the performance of that camera is stellar as always. Is it perfect? No, but it's pretty damn close. If I could wave a magic wand, what would be the few things that I want to change about this phone? Well, the first thing is the two-tone color on the back. Maybe a better looking design for the camera plateau would be nice as well. And it would be nice to have this kind of power and features in the form factor of the absurdly thin iPhone Air. Also, getting rid of the front screen dynamic island and hiding all those components under the screen is, like I said, kind of a holy grail for phone manufacturers nowadays. I'm sure that's coming. It's just not quite here yet. So, as I said at the outset, the iPhone has come a long way since 2007. Through iterative and sometimes revolutionary changes, the iPhone just keeps getting better. And while throngs of startups and trillion-dollar companies alike are trying to figure out what form factor will ultimately unseat the smartphone, I'm betting that it will actually remain the king of the hill, the iPhone in particular, for many years to come. So, what do you think about this year's Pro models? Are you upgrading? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this review helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more tech reviews like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.